the southwest, a low of 7. Then tomorrow, sunny and very warm with the hottest conditions over the west and south, a high of 28. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It's 8 here on LBC. It's a welcome return for Cross Question. We haven't done it for a couple of weeks because we've been interviewing all of these various Tory leadership candidates. Well, it is a return of Cross Question tonight. You can watch us on our Facebook page, on our Twitter feed, or at lbc.co.uk. With me over the next hour to take your questions, Gillian Keegan, Conservative MP for Chichester, Lord Charlie Falconer, former Labour Justice Secretary, Mark Fox from the Business Services Association, and Michael Walker, editor at Novara Media. The number to call if you'd like to speak to my panel and put a question to them, 0345 6060 973.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
And welcome to you all. Let's crack on with our first question. It's Phil in Watford. Phil, what would you like to ask?
With the Tory leadership election coming up, one of the two will become the next Prime Minister. And I would like to ask whether the panel think that we need a leaver now to take control of the country to be different to Mrs May, or whether it would be okay to just have Mrs May Mark II.
Mark Fox.
Well, I don't think we need a lever other than Parliament and some effective politics. And I don't think either of the candidates are going to be offering Mrs May Mark II. What we do need to see from these two is a persuasive and compelling plan on how they're going to address the issue of Brexit and then address the really pressing issues around the domestic agenda. And so far, I don't think we have seen that from either of them.
But the accusation from the Johnson camp about Jeremy Hunt is that he is Theresa May Mark II. He voted Remain, although he has pivoted to Leave since then. They're saying, well, you've got to have somebody who, in their gut, believes in Brexit.
So I think we need to see less personal attacks. Boris would tell you fewer ad hominem attacks. And we need to see more substance and we need to see more policy. I don't think that it does anything for the reputation of politics or politicians to see two people knocking two bells, three bells.
Have they done that, really?
Yes, I think that calling into question people's integrity, calling into people's conviction to get the job done is not really what we want to see. We want to see people with effective and persuasive plans to deliver on this very divisive issue.
So you don't think Boris Johnson was entitled to send a letter to Jeremy Hunt wanting to clarify his position on leaving on the 31st of October? I mean, that's surely all's fair in love and politics.
Of course it is, but it would be more to the point if they both came on this show and had the discussion with you direct. I mean, all in favour of supporting the post office. But actually, these two can sort these discussions and these issues out if they would sit in the same place and have the discussion.
Charlie Falconer, you've seen a few leadership elections over the years. What do you make of this one so far?
I think it's awful. I think it is really making the public think that the leadership of the country is going to be compromised. I get the sense that Mr Hunt is holding back and not really putting Boris Johnson under pressure. The whole point about the reason for the leadership election was stated to be you have to put these leaders under pressure. And the way that Boris Johnson is behaving throughout all this is he comes and goes as he pleases. He doesn't necessarily put himself in the firing line or in a debate, as Mark has said, which is a perfectly sensible thing to say. He changes his position. He avoids proper pressure. And I think the country are spotting that, because it's not do they need a leaver, it's the country needs a leader, somebody who we respect and respect enough to follow in relation to Brexit. And it is not an edifying performance that is going on at the moment. A perfectly decent Foreign Secretary not willing really to put Boris under pressure, and Boris jumping around all over the place. I don't know if you watched the Tuesday debate, not this Tuesday, but the Tuesday before, in which all five of them were shouting across each other. It was a moment.
I didn't in the end, because I was told it was so awful. I just thought, what's the point?
Well, I mean, you saying it was so awful is broadly the opinion of sort of non-politically engaged people, and it's just a continuation of this demeaning, awful, third-rate battle going on. And of course, I'm Labour, so I've got to, I would be easily sort of unimpressed. Previously, in leadership battles in the Tory party, the last two have turned out quite often to be pretty impressive. That is not the position this time.
Gillian, Keegan, Jeremy Hunt said in these digital hustings that have just taken place, there's very little difference in practice between me and Boris over Brexit. Are you pleased about that? Are you horrified by that?
There's very little difference because the facts are the facts, and the parliamentary arithmetic's the same for both leaders. The position of the EU, I believe, will be more or less the same for both leaders. I mean, the chap's question was, could a Brexiteer get a better deal? I don't think so. I don't think that's a criteria for the negotiation. As I think one time Rory could put it, it's a battle of machismo, but actually it won't make a difference. Really, I don't know. I don't believe it will. They've got the same things they're dealing with, the same time pressure, the same set of expectations that have been overpromised and underdelivered thus far, and not willing, in my view, to have maybe a more forthright conversation with the public to say actually what no deal is. No deal's a slogan. You can't leave or implement a slogan. You have to actually have a plan, and you could put a plan together. Do
you think either of them have a plan?
No, because here's what you need to do. You need to decide what your tariff structure is. You need to consider what that does to each industrial sector. You need to have a mitigating plan for that. You need to figure out what you're going to do on national security, and you need to figure out what you're going to do on the Irish border. That's just for the first sort of hour, and then you've got all the other stuff underneath that. There's probably about 300 bilaterals required. Do you not think
that they've given any thought to this? They must have done, surely. Because,
why aren't we seeing it?
Well, in a month's time, one of them is going to have to go to the EU and say, right, these are my ideas. I mean, I tried to explore this a bit on Saturday and say, well, look, is there a document? Have you put together a document that I don't expect you to tell me necessarily what all of the things that are in it, but is there a document ready to go? And they didn't see, and neither of them seemed to think.
Well, there is a document.
They didn't reveal that they had it.
There's a document that the government put together already. So there's a tariff structure that's been put together. There's obviously a lot of no-deal planning, but the no-deal planning that they're talking about is the no-deal planning for government departments and those that are run by government. So borders, for example, border systems, etc. But actually, this is the impact on other businesses if we have a tariff structure which is either the one that the external tariff, Europe tariff structure today, or the one that was put in the suggestion by the government just before the 29th of March, which is kind of slightly better than that. But these have big impacts. They put immediate large tariffs onto certain sectors of our agricultural industry, certainly some of the beef and lamb farming for sure, probably wheat as well, and definitely car manufacturing and other sectors in manufacturing in general.
And what about Boris Johnson's argument about GATT24, which he's slightly pivoted on over the last couple of days and admitted that it is only something that you can do if the European Union agrees to it? Is there anything in that?
Anything that you try to say is manageable or you're managing in any way. So GATT24 basically says we're going to agree to have a sort of a holding pattern while we negotiate a free trade agreement. Anything like that, any bilateral, any extension, any change of terms, anything collaborative means you have to agree with exactly the same people that you're about to do what with. Go over and tell them you're going to, cause this issue both on the Irish border and for both of the economies, unless they do what. And so I'm not sure why they'll cooperate if you're not cooperating.
On the face of it, it does seem sensible that if there can't be an agreement on everything immediately, to just let things carry on for the moment without damage to anyone. I mean, on the face of it, that seems a sensible thing to do. It's
extremely sensible. That's why the withdrawal agreement had a transition period or an implementation period in it. It's absolutely the right thing to do. And the withdrawal agreement, which has been, much battered mostly by people who wanted a completely different outcome. So, the Labour Party, it's a terrible deal because, they want to be in power. They want a general election, and then people on the Remain side, it's a terrible deal because they want another referendum and they would like the answer to be Remain. And actually, if you read the 597 pages and if you understand a bit about business, it's actually not a bad deal, which is why all the businesses supported it. Of course, it's got risk. You cannot leave the European Union without taking risk. But we need to, as a country, just do that with our eyes open, because it was a reasonable approach in my view.
Michael Walker, looking at this from the Corbyn side of the argument, if you can, I mean, how do you view this contest? And I mean, in a way, the Labour Party ought to be cleaning up at the moment.
Well, I mean, we know that Brexit has caused both parties political difficulties, especially in the polls. In terms of looking on at this contest, I was quite disappointed when Jeremy Hunt got through, because I knew that the Tory membership are not going to vote for anyone who wasn't a Leaver in 2016. And my worry is that means that Boris Johnson is not going to be under that much scrutiny from his own side here. If I was a Tory MP, I'd have very little interest in really holding his feet to the fire and saying, what is your plan? It's not really good enough to just keep bumbling along until the 31st of October and hope for the best. But you know that, well, we all know that Boris Johnson is going to be the next Prime Minister. If you're a Tory MP that wants a cabinet position, your job is to make him look okay. So I'm worried we're going to get an MP who hasn't been put through any serious tests, who is going to become the most important person in the country without having a plan. We've got to remember that it's been over 3 years since he decided to send off the opinion piece, which meant he backed Leave instead of backing Remain. We know he wrote 2, but he's had 3 years to come up with a plan, and it doesn't seem like there is one other than bluffing. So as you say, from a Labour perspective, it's disappointing that we're not higher up in the polls at this point. But I can't see how the Tory party are going to get out of this bind, because at the moment they're promising things which aren't possible.
Just very briefly, I mean, we might get a question on this later, I don't know, but there's been a shadow cabinet meeting, was it today or yesterday, which didn't seem to come to any great conclusion. But according to Robert Peston, it's the first time that there's been a division between John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn on any issue, but particularly on this one. Where do you think Labour are heading on this?
I mean, it looks like they're heading towards... I mean, they already have, if you look deep enough into their statements back to second referendum. I think at this point, given that the Labour Party is in favour of a second referendum, they should shout about that a bit more proudly. There is an argument going on that they should back Remain. I'm not actually too sure why this matters that much. I mean, because there isn't a second referendum yet. So whether or not you back Remain or Leave in that second referendum is almost... It's almost virtue signalling. It's saying if it were to happen, we would back Remain. And I think there's a danger that the Labour Party are going to get pushed into the same position that the People's Vote found themselves in, which is they're calling, a second referendum a confirmatory vote. They're trying to say this is about democracy, not about overturning the result of the referendum. But because they've been screaming about Remain for 3 years, no one believes them. So everyone does think it is people trying to reverse a democratic decision. So now to see the same people try and force this same mistake on the Labour leadership, to me seems a little bizarre.
I mean, I rather agree with what Michael has said, except in this respect. It's very difficult.
A Blairite agreeing with a Corbynista. This is marvellous.
I've always found that Jeremy Corbyn has broadly been in a Blairite position over many years. As far as the position of the public is concerned, I think they would see Labour adopting a second referendum as obviously a Remain position. Nobody in their right mind would put the country through a second referendum with all the consequences the first has got, unless you were absolutely determined to do your level best to try to reverse it. And the idea... Michael's slightly wincing at that, but the idea that this is...
That alliance didn't last long.
No, we're still in the same place, I'm sure. The idea that this is being done for some sort of constitutional or democratic process is wrong. I think, indeed, from my experience, the Labour Party is very strongly in favour of a second referendum. I'm not, but the Labour Party is, and that's because they want to remain.
All right, let's get a quick word from Phil from Watford. Phil, what do you make of what you've heard?
Well, to be honest, it's the normal stuff. But my point on it is, I suppose, that we had Theresa May, and she could have made a success of Brexit, in my opinion. But she went back on the things that she said, and I've lost count of the amount of times that she said we will leave on the 29th of March, and that no deal is better than a bad deal. And to be honest, I just see Jeremy Hunt in exactly the same vein. Okay. He's saying exactly the same things. He'll do exactly the same thing and let the country down.
All right.
And I've got to vote, and I couldn't vote for Jeremy in a month of Sundays.
All right, Phil, thank you very much for that. We can Jeremy? Take...
Probably I.
I'll leave that to your imagination. We can take calls not just on Tory leadership, by the way. So if you've got burning questions on anything else, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Cross Question on LBC. It's 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Dan, are you ready yet?
Just need to finish off my hair.
Well, hurry up.
And iron my shirt, pick my shoes, and rub on some beard oil.
Usually you have to put in a little extra to look the part. However, with the Fiesta ST Line 3-door, with its unique full-body styling kit and sports-tuned suspension. From just £199 per month on Ford Personal Lease, we've done that little bit extra for you. Search Fiesta 199 for more information.
Oh, I need to finish off my teeth.
Ford. Together, we go further.
Advance rental of £1,791, 47 monthly rentals of £199 provided by ALD Automotive Limited, subject to status. You will not own the car. Additional charges may apply, subject to mileage and condition.
Psst! Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service? For plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
Clearance at John Lewis & Partners Oxford Street is now on. There are thousands of great offers, from kitchen and homeware to fashion and beauty, as well as expert advice from our partners and a minimum 2-year guarantee on all our electricals. More of what you love for less. Clearance now on.
G'day.
Hi, it's Sean from Bath.
Seano.
I'm playing Sunday League and I forgot to bring my towel. Can I borrow my mate's?
Negative, big guy.
Borrowing a used towel from a mate is like borrowing his undies.
And you wouldn't put your groceries in another man's trolley now, would you?
So, what do I do?
First grab your pants and use them as a towel.
Then slip into commando stealth mode.
The Scots have been doing it for centuries.
And in much more severe weather conditions.
It's a great idea, guys. Thanks.
No worries.
Foster's. Good call.
Drinkaware.co.uk for the facts.
In the trade, sign up to Wix Trade Pro and get 10% off every time you shop with no minimum spend. Download the app to register. Always cheaper with Wix Trade Pro. Terms apply.
Does it matter to you how your money's invested? Think about it. You've got your own values, but do the people who invest your money share them? With a Wealthify stocks and shares ISA, you can put your money into an ethical plan. Just tell us how you want to invest. Are you cautious, adventurous, or somewhere in between? And start your Wealthify Ethical ISA today. Easy. For more information, download the app or visit wealthify.com. With investing, capital is at risk and you could get back less than you put in.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8 here on LBC. With me in the studio, Gillian Keegan, Conservative MP for Chichester, Mark Fox from the Business Services Association, Michael Walker from Novara Media, and Lord Charlie Falconer, former Justice Secretary. David's in Hampstead. Hi, Dave. Sorry, I'm going to go to David in a minute. My mistake. Let's go to Molly, who's a new caller in Gatwick. Hello, Molly.
Hi, Ian. How are you?
Hi, very well. What would you like to ask?
So your guests have spoken a lot about parliamentary arithmetic in terms of the new Prime Minister getting deal or no deal through. But surely if the MPs had just voted based on what the constituencies voted for in the referendum, then we wouldn't have this problem. So I wanted to ask the MPs why they feel they should be able to vote based on their opinion rather than their constituencies.
That's an interesting question, which we talk about a lot actually on the programme. Now, Gillian, I think I'm right in saying your constituents voted Leave.
Yep. And I've voted to leave 3 times now with that deal.
You didn't in the referendum, though.
I didn't in the referendum, but I've respected the democratic decision, and 3 times I've voted to leave.
Do you feel a sense that you need to, because there are a lot of MPs that haven't voted the way their constituents voted, whichever side of the argument is on? Do you feel a pressure to vote in a particular way because your constituency voted that way?
I didn't feel a pressure because, to me, if you're going to have a democratic vote, we have one of the oldest and most respected democracies in the world, and we ought not to mess around with that. And if you have asked people to vote and you've said you're going to respect that vote, and there's a lot of discussion about whether we should have done it or not, whether we did it in the right way. I wasn't in Parliament at the time, but if we've done it, then I firmly believe that we must enact that decision. Now, that does not mean enacting it in a way which is, it's been completely hijacked now by the Brexit Party and whoever else wants to jump into the mix, saying unless it looks like this and this, none of which was talked about at all at the time of the referendum, that they're hijacking and they're kind of, saying unless it looks like this, it's not proper Brexit. No, that's not true. But, this has to be respected. I think it's for me, it wasn't a question. Even if my seat had voted to remain, the country as a whole, as the United Kingdom, voted to leave. So that was the basis on which we went into this, and I think we have to respect it. And so therefore I've changed my position because I respect democracy, and I do believe, though, we can leave in a sensible way that actually if we had an honest conversation, you could do this in a way that would be fair and reasonable, would protect businesses and jobs, and actually you could even include some of the concerns that younger people have about what their future would look like. You could include all that in the future relationship, and you could do it reasonably.
Michael Walker, in a sense, you could argue, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but Jeremy Corbyn's position is almost that, trying to deliver the result of the referendum, or respecting the result of the referendum, even though he knows his own party, certainly party members and many voters, don't agree with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that is his position. I think going back to the question itself, I mean, there's two issues. One, which is that MPs aren't just delegates, they're also representatives, so they get to make up their own mind.
Well, they aren't delegates at all, actually, if you look constitutionally.
Yeah, I suppose they're just representatives. But going back to the issue before about a second referendum and why I think it shouldn't just be seen as trying to reverse the result, but also solving a constitutional problem, is that the mandate that 2016 gave the MPs was to leave the European Union. But every MP is quite correct when they say there was no mandate for any particular kind of Brexit. And so they're within their rights to say when people voted leave, they didn't vote for this, because people did vote for something very vague. And that's not obviously to say that people who voted for it were doing anything wrong. I voted Remain.
But you're sounding a bit leavy.
Well, look, I don't think whether or not we leave the EU is the be-all and end-all of British politics. I think that it's important that politicians and commentators, everyone is very clear that all positions in this, well, all reasonable positions, as long as the plans are laid out, are legitimate. Why I'd like to see a second referendum is not to necessarily reverse the result, but because referendum should only happen when the plans are already drawn up. So the problem here is that there's been a referendum on a question where it was designed because people thought the status quo was going to be maintained, and there was no plan for Brexit that was written down. If there is another referendum, what needs to happen is there needs to be two envelopes. One of them is you send to the civil servants to say we're going to remain, and one of them is you send to the civil servants which has a full plan for how we are going to do Brexit. That needs to be public, and there needs to be no role for MPs after that. So I think this idea of you give a vague mandate to MPs and then expect them to come out with something was always going to be incredibly problematic. And I think
that's the job of government, though, to implement decisions like that.
Well, the job of government and the job of
the fact that they haven't been able to do it is almost by the by.
Well, the job of MPs is to vote for what they think is right and what they believe in, unless there is a mandate, right? And here there is a mandate to leave the European Union. But any MP, be that a Labour MP who says we want to respect the result of the referendum, but we think the option that we want, which is in line with the mandate that 2016 gave, was a soft Brexit. Then you've got people in the ERG who say we want to respect the mandate by doing a hard
but
Brexit.
The withdrawal agreement is the same in every single subsequent deal, and what we're stuck on is just passing the withdrawal agreement. So actually the withdrawal agreement could have passed. It doesn't change for any flavour of Brexit.
Charlie Ford, do you think this, taking up Michael's point there, do you think this was inevitable all along? There was no plan. The government was almost proud not to have a plan. They didn't have any civil servants working on a plan before the referendum, as George Osborne revealed in this studio, which I was horrified by. And the fact that you have a Remainer Parliament, the fact that you have a civil service that effectively we all know would prefer to stay in, you have a Remain-dominated cabinet. It's always inevitable, wasn't it?
You don't know that at all.
I absolutely do know that.
At all.
I absolutely do know
just
that.
Say that about
well, I was asking
service.
Charlie, Mark, so let him answer.
I don't think this was inevitable. I think all that you say is right, that there's a Remainer Parliament, but I think what Gillian is saying is broadly correct. The MPs have approached this on the basis that we've lost on the referendum. We've therefore got to give effect to it because, as Michael rightly says, there's a mandate that goes beyond whatever you think the right thing to do is. And I think we have, as a political group, made an absolutely monumental mess of it, both in the eyes of the public and in the eyes of the outside world beyond the United Kingdom. I don't believe it's beyond saving, though I am genuinely worried that the way that Mr Hunt and Mr Johnson are conducting themselves makes it less likely that we're going to get a deal. I think Michael is ultimately wrong and quixotic when you say, oh look, let's have in one envelope the precise terms of which we're going to leave, and it's yay or nay to that. I don't know if you've noticed, but the Commons are proving incredibly difficult to agree on anything, and the idea that they could agree what the precise terms of the leave proposition would be seems to me to be impossible. The way it should be working is the country voted to leave. In effect, come what may, that doesn't mean no deal. They trusted the politicians to work out a sensible way of doing it. And my God, have the politicians messed up. And it's very difficult to see, unless the government, the new government, pulls something out of a hat, that this Parliament, the Commons, will be regarded as a total bunch of failures.
The problem's a hung Parliament. Trying to do it in a hung Parliament.
No, it's not just that. It is a failure to agree, and the failure to agree whether you're hung or not in relation to it will not be forgiven for the fact that you're a different party.
Let's hear from Mark Fox.
I've done the right thing.
He clearly wants to.
I'm sure you've done the right thing.
He clearly wants to have a go at me, but I want you to go back to the original question first of all about MPs being mandated by their constituents. That was effectively the point that Molly was making.
Well, we all know that that is not the correct understanding of what the parliamentary democracy is about. It's also why referendums are just antithetical to how we run our political system in this country. They just don't sit. Only weak leaders call referendums. And if you look at the pattern of referendums, it's because a Prime Minister...
Tony Blair wasn't a weak leader. When he became Prime Minister, he called all sorts of referendums.
He was fulfilling John Smith's legacy, but that's a different point on devolution. Harold Wilson, David Cameron, they called the referendums on Europe because they were in a position of extreme weakness with party division. So the beginning of the whole thing was out of a huge sense of political weakness. The way we resolve it in the end is if we think that Parliament is not in line with the wishes of the people, we have general elections. Twice in this recent period, we should have had a general election, arguably, when the government lost that vote by that serious amount and so on. And the real problem here is the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which I don't want to get on the wrong side of Lord Falconer, but is a really wicked thing to have put.
I know, it was
right? No, I know,
lot that did it.
but I didn't want to get into a sort of...
Right, okay, yeah.
But it's a really damaging thing, and it should be, because we need to change the composition of the House of Commons till it reflects what people want to see done.
So what did I say that you were objecting to?
Oh, because you said we all know that the civil service is Remainer-y.
Well, we do. I mean, is that a matter of...
It's not a record. It's not a matter of record, but what you've found is people have taken these labels, and it's like the first question. Do you have to be a Brexiteer? Until 3 years ago, I had no idea that my best friend I've known for 40 years was a Leaver and I was a Remainer. None of us ever thought about life in these terms. It's
still
ridiculous.
Your best friend?
She is, and she's Labour and I'm Conservative. There's some
That's
things,
what we like to hear.
But this has become ridiculous now. We're all being defined by something we never even gave a moment's thought about. Unless you're a Eurosceptic and you made it your life's mission, or you're Farage, the rest of us did not wake up in the morning thinking about this. It wasn't even a thing that defined us.
Well, you are absolutely right on that. I had to slightly correct my colleague James O'Brien on Twitter the other day when he said that I was a lifelong Brexiteer. I said, mate, I was speaking for the European movement back in the 1980s. I didn't decide to vote Leave until the abortive negotiations in 2016. I'm sure I come across as a sort of hard-headed Brexiteer, but
you do. But
Gillian is right. Apart from the Eurosceptics, you knew that Bill Cash was very against the European Union.
This is life's work.
But most members of Parliament didn't have a definition politically that came from their position on that, and certainly members of the public didn't.
Let's just get a quick reaction from Molly. Molly, are you convinced by what you've heard, or do you really think that MPs should be mandated by their constituents' votes?
I just think it's shocking that we're still having this argument, really. The Parliament and the government decided to give the decision to the people, and since that decision, it feels like they've just refused to implement it, saying, this still isn't good enough, this doesn't do this doesn't do that. I was 18 when I voted to leave, and it was the first vote I ever made, and it still hasn't been implemented, and I just think it's shocking.
You could be drawing your pension.
Well, that's an optimistic note to end the first half of the programme on. I might introduce something myself into the next hour, because Jeremy Hunt has just been interviewed by Robert Peston, and Robert Peston asked him a question, which I'll tell you about in a moment, which rather shocked and surprised Jeremy Hunt. It's 8:32. Let's get the latest news headlines from Tim Humphrey.
The Labour MP Chris Williamson has been readmitted to the party after being suspended in February over comments he made suggesting Labour's been too apologetic over anti-Semitism claims. He's been given a formal warning. The decision has been called an utter disgrace by the Board of Deputies of British Jews. The DUP leader says it's very important the UK leaves the EU by October the 31st, but has refused to back either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Hunt to become the next Prime Minister. Arlene Foster's insisted the government must tackle the problematic Irish border backstop issue and unlock the withdrawal agreement. The two contenders have been taking part in digital hustings on the party's Facebook page. More than 10,000 climate change protesters have been demonstrating outside Parliament, asking their MPs to take action. A target to cut greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050 is due to come into law this week. LBC weather: dry and increasingly cloudy across eastern and central England and northern Scotland tonight. Clear but chilly elsewhere with strong winds in the southwest, and it's a low of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
I want to feel in control of my energy bills.
I want to stop wasting money on my energy.
Get a smart meter and you can track and make changes to save energy around the home. Plus, you'll be helping to build a smarter grid for a more sustainable future.
I want to live in a world where we can breathe cleaner air.
There's no extra cost, so don't put it off. Search I Want a Smart Meter or call 0300 131 6666 and join the campaign for a smarter Britain.
Eligibility may vary. Available in England, Scotland and Wales by 2020. Calls from UK landlines and mobiles charged at a standard rate.
At the AA, we're always trying to make your journey better. Our mechanics fix 8 out of 10 cars at the roadside, usually within 30 minutes of arriving. You could say we're simply the best. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong song. Join today from just £4.50 a month. Visit theaa.com. The AA, because anything can happen. New customers only. T's and C's apply.
You can complain free to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman about missold PPI. Alternatively, if you haven't got the time or the inclination, then just get the claims guys to manage the claims process for you. With the August 29th deadline approaching, time's at a premium anyway. So if you can't find your paperwork or you're not even sure you have PPI, it's definitely time to make a decision and start your PPI claim before it's too late. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
There's nothing like meeting face-to-face. And there's nothing like Zoom to make that happen. Zoom lets you connect and do business across town or around the world. Zoom ties together all of your communication needs into one easy platform for video conferencing, phone calls, group chat, webinars, and your conference rooms. Connect easily from anywhere, your mobile phone, your laptop, or conference room. Zoom is how business gets done. Get your free account at zoom.com today. Meet happy with Zoom.
Clearance at John Lewis and Partners Oxford Street is now on. There are thousands of great offers from kitchen and homeware to fashion and beauty, as well as expert advice from our partners and a minimum 2-year guarantee on all our electricals. More of what you love for less. Clearance now on.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 25 to 9 here on LBC. We're not going to talk about this, but I will tell you that on the Robert Peston show tonight, he's asked Jeremy Hunt about the fact that his sister died only a few months old when he was 2 years old. And Jeremy Hunt had no idea that he was going to be asked that question. I think there's all sorts of reverberations that will come from that. Let's go to our next question. We're with Gillian, Keegan, Charlie Falconer, Mark Fox and Michael Walker. David's in Hampstead. Hi, David.
Hi, Ian. Great show as always.
Thank you.
So a question particularly for Lord Falconer and Michael Walker. I'm a Jew. I live in London. I've lived here all my life, 27. Why is it when it comes to the Labour Party specifically, and I'm saying that because I don't want them to allude to wider society, why is it the Labour Party specifically redefine anti-Semitism, and they are, with Chris Williamson's now readmission into the Labour Party, treating Jews as second rate, and they are effectively othering Jews. Chris Williamson said that, they're overdoing it effectively with responding in any way to anti-Semitism. I cannot even start to tell you how hurtful it is as a Jew living in this country that Her Majesty's opposition have a problem infecting their party in this way.
So what's your question?
So my question is, why do the Labour Party seek to redefine anti-Semitism? And when Jews call it out, as I'm calling it out, and as Jews have done many, many times, they are told, no, this isn't anti-Semitism. The Labour Party will effectively redefine it and tell us anti-Semitism.
All right. Michael Walker.
So in terms of the actual question, so I mean, obviously, it's no one enjoys as a Labour Party member hearing someone talk about the party in that way. And I think most people in the party now recognise that there have been big mistakes, especially when it comes to the disciplinary process being too slow, being too awkward, and sometimes people dragging their feet, I suppose, in terms of dealing with a problem with a very small minority of people in the party. In terms of the question specifically about definitions, I'm not sure if that was in relation to the controversy last summer about the International Holocaust Remembrance Association or Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And I mean, I was someone actually last summer who was arguing that we shouldn't adopt that definition, or at least we shouldn't adopt all the examples, and I still hold by that position. So I really do not want to reawaken that particular argument, because I don't think it was particularly productive for the Labour Party or for anyone. But I do think that's an instructive example of how at times this particular row has played out. So this definition with these examples, yes, there were many major Jewish organisations in the country who supported it being adopted, but there were sort of examples within it which referred to Israel, and there were many Palestinian civil society organisations who did not support it. And that means that as a political party, what you have to do is you have to listen to all sides, you have to take on all concerns on board, both from Palestinian organisations and Jewish organisations. And that's only because this mentioned Israel. There's always a problem of people bringing up Israel when the conversation is anti-Semitism, but in this instance, I mean, it was in the document, and eventually they did adopt it, but this was always reported as Labour tried to redefine anti-Semitism. And I think actually what they were trying to do was navigate a very sensitive issue where there were two groups of people.
Well, they didn't do it very well, did they?
Yeah, but I mean, they were in a very difficult situation. So they're saying, look, we're trying to listen to Palestinian civil society organisations that say they want this modified. And then everyone's saying to them, you're trying to redefine anti-Semitism. And they're under enormous pressure in that situation. It is very difficult for them to deal with that.
What about Chris Williamson's readmission today? Because that happened late this afternoon. Apparently there was supposed to have been a hearing yesterday. It was adjourned, and the membership of the panel was changed. They're being accused of rigging it, so he's been readmitted. What message does that send out to David in Hampstead?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that readmission doesn't send out a good message, as it were. I mean, having looked at the case...
Would you have readmitted him?
Probably not, but having looked at the case, I think it's important to be clear about what has been said. So no one seems to be claiming, or at least the Labour Party has never suggested, and I don't believe that Chris Williamson has said anything that's anti-Semitic. What Chris Williamson has done is what I think is speak in a way which has been somewhat irresponsible in the manner in which it's downplayed the problem, and has done so in, at times, an inflammatory way. So there, for me, the suspension was correct because of what the Labour Party called a pattern of behaviour. And what you would hope to see is that before he's readmitted, he has to demonstrate that he takes this problem seriously, and that he intends to change his pattern of behaviour. No, and see, that's what's awkward, and that's why potentially the readmission was a mistake. Right. But they argue that because the trigger ballot process is about to start, if he's still in limbo, then what do? Either you automatically reselect him and then he gets an advantage over all the other MPs, or you expel him and they're not at that pace.
Okay, Mark Fox.
So I am a priest, as you know, in the Church of England.
You lived a double life. Like many I mustn't say that, must I?
So I would simply say this, is that people of all faiths and religions, and none, should be treated with equal respect. And I have to say, the longer the explanation on this subject, the less persuasive the answer. Because it's very simple and it's very straightforward.
I should explain to listeners that Mark was looking directly at Michael at that point.
Only with respect. And I think you just have to treat other human beings, wherever you find them, with decency and respect. And you know it when you see it, and you know it when you don't.
Charlie Falconer, you've got an interesting role in this, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, and just picking up what Michael said, I respect completely Michael's sincerity about the IHRA definition. His concern was that it might stop legitimate criticism of the state of Israel. I think it was a very bad mistake, but it was a political mistake for the Labour Party not to adopt it in full without question. I completely sympathise with David's question. There are real question marks over Labour's commitment to fight off anti-Semitism, and they are very big question marks. And although I'm absolutely sure the vast majority of members of the Labour Party are not anti-Semitic, there are probably thousands of anti-Semitics in the Labour Party, and we need to be absolutely dynamic and clear in our disciplinary process in saying we will not put up with it. And our problem is, for reasons that Michael has gone into, which are sincere, we've ended up sounding uncertain and unclear that we will not put up with anti-Semitism. And there's now another dangerous aspect to it, which is it's becoming factional within the Labour Party. If you're, quote, a moderate or to the right, you're in favour of fighting anti-Semitism, and if you're far to the left, then you're not in favour of fighting anti-Semitism. And that's a terrible place for the Labour Party to be. The Labour Party has got to be, as Michael and I am quite sure are, united in fighting anti-Semitism. And people like David, from the question he's asked, which is completely sincere, have a doubt about that.
But you now have a formal role in this, don't you?
Well, I was going to play the part of, I was going to be, as it were, the surveillance commissioner within the Labour Party. That was before the Equalities Commission came on board.
All right, so
I think through no fault of the Equalities Commission, it's going to take a long time for that to be dealt with. I think I am very worried, for example, about the Pete Willsman case. He's on the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, and he said all of the vast majority of anti-Semitic complaints were procured by the Israeli embassy. Now that would give nobody any confidence if that's what a member of the ruling body thought was the source of the anti-Semitic claims. So we need to do something about it, and do something about it quickly.
It's worth saying he's been suspended.
Yes, he's been
an important
suspended.
But you see, that's
point.
an interesting case where, Michael, you could argue that, well, that's not actually an anti-Semitic comment. It may be a distasteful comment, but it's not necessarily anti-Semitic, and that's why you go back to the agreement, I suppose, very briefly.
I mean, I think in that case that is anti-Semitic. I mean, I think we all accept that with different forms of racism, you don't have to say I hate X people for it to be racist. If someone's buying into a trope without any evidence and in a completely insensitive way, then I think we can say that there is playing into it.
Well, I just think it's unbelievably sad in 2019 in our country that people phone up like David feeling how they feel. I mean, how's this happened? It's never, if you go back a couple of years ago, this wasn't a thing. Again, it wasn't a thing. It's come from nowhere. It's come from the hard left, actually, probably, but it's come there. And I just find it so sad that people in our country, everything we know about how Jewish people have been treated over the decades, feel that way in London, in the UK, in 2019. It's deeply sad.
David, quick word from you.
Yeah, I think it sums it all up. The fact that the answers from Michael and Lord Falconer are just that effectively. It's more complicated. I'm a Jew. I'm telling you, I have experienced it. I've experienced it from Labour members, and nothing's going to be done with attitudes like that, and that really is the problem, and I think they need to face up to it.
OK, David, thank you very much. We have 15 more minutes, so let's try and get 2 questions in the next section of the programme. We've got a very good text here for the final one, which is, I'm going to give it to you now so you can prepare an answer for this, because it does relate to something that was put to Boris Johnson yesterday. What is your favourite hobby? Sounds a simple question, doesn't it? But we'll come to that right at the end of the programme. It's 8:45.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m.
How many one-to-one interviews will your candidate do during this election? I can't answer that. I mean, I think that...
Well, let me ask you another question. Will he resign if he fails to deliver Brexit by October the 31st?
Well, I think Boris has been absolutely clear.
No, he hasn't.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
If travelling is your passion, fall for somewhere new. Fly British Airways to St Kitts, an island of 1,000 treasures. With year-round experiences and cultural gems, explore this laid-back island and get to know your new love. September holidays with flights and 7 nights hotel from $629 per person. Fly from Gatwick. Book by July 2nd at ba.com/St Kitts. No one takes you there like British Airways. Booking fees and conditions may apply. Limited availability. ATOL protected.
Get an Ocean credit card. Check if you're eligible in minutes without affecting your credit score. It comes with a credit limit of up to £1,500 too. So get online and check for yourself at ocean.co.uk and get all that from Ocean. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One, the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable.
Divorce can be expensive. It affects your finances, assets, home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. It's probably one of the toughest times you'll ever go through. Cordell & Cordell understands these issues and helps men maximise their roles in their children's lives. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk. Office in central London. A partner men can count on.
5 out of 5. It's a fantastic smart TV. Decent value for money and the picture quality is incredible. Not that I've actually watched it, never even used it. That's right, this is a fake review. And I can paint quite the picture for the right price, of course. Wasting your time and your money.
A fake review could cost you more than you think. A Which membership helps you avoid these lies. Search Which for impartial product reviews. Which, keep questioning.
The world of financial investments can be complex and intimidating, which is why you trusted the experts at your bank. But they let you down and sold you an investment that lost money. At Goodwin Barrett, we'll help you through the process of making a complaint and winning the compensation you deserve. Right now, Goodwin Barrett are offering a quick investment assessment to discover just how much you could be owed. To start yours, text SOLD to 66777. Text SOLD to 66777 now.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060973.
8:48. Remember, you can watch us on the LBC Facebook page, Twitter feed, and on the website at lbc.co.uk. With me, Mark Fox, Lord Falconer, Gillian, Keegan, and Michael Walker. Keith is in Chorley. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Ian. Hi, thank you for having me on. Hello to the panel. So I wanted to start a bit of a discussion, and I also had a question about some of the recent events that have been happening down in Birmingham. As you're probably aware, there's been protests about the teaching of same-sex relationships by some members of the Muslim community in Birmingham. So I should probably start a little bit about what my position is on it. I think of the British culture. Try
and be as brief as you can, Keith, because we haven't got a huge amount of time.
Okay, I don't have my own spot. I'm only joking. Right, so obviously British culture is one that's the bedrock of being, an inclusive society. Do you not think that the government should be taking a stronger stance on this? And if they should be taking a stronger stance, what should they be doing? Should they be looking to mandate the teaching of same-sex relationships?
Okay.
And how would they go about doing that?
All right, Keith, thank you very much. Gillian, let's come to you first. I don't know if you were in the Commons yesterday when Angela Eagle made a very emotional speech saying, look, we came out of the closet a long time ago. We're not going to go back in. Do you think that government action is needed here?
I think where this came up from was there was some government action. So there were some new guidelines about sex education. And basically it was saying that children should be taught about different types of relationships, two mums, two dads, different sort of family structures from a young age. So it just becomes completely, even if they don't know anybody, it's just completely natural, completely accepted from the get-go. So that was new guidance. And then there was more about sex education, basically, for those children in the last couple of years at school, and it was being made mandatory because you couldn't have 16-year-olds effectively leaving without having had any sex education. So that's, I think, what led to this in the first place. And it's completely right. We are a very inclusive society, and I think we move also very quickly as a society. There was a lot of people who were worried about gay marriage whenever it was a decade or so ago, and now it's completely 100% celebrated pretty much across the country. So we are an inclusive society, and I think it is right. There are still some children, perhaps, though, who could potentially be bullied at school. I mean, my cousin, her child did suffer from some bullying at school because he had two mums. So maybe it is just worthwhile making sure that young children do understand that families come in all different shapes.
Michael?
Well, I mean, I think homophobic bullying in secondary schools especially is rife. So I don't think we should understate the extent to which inclusive education is absolutely required. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be mandated by the government, and Ofsted, when they do inspections, should make sure that teachers are teaching people about the diversity of relationships that people can find themselves in. I do think there's a bit of a danger in, I feel like some of the phrasing of the question was trying to pitch a Muslim community against LGBT people. I think, for one, we talk about Britain as being an inclusive society, but we've got to remember that what these people are protesting about is the teaching of homosexual relationships in school, and that was illegal in Britain until the early noughties.
Which they aren't being taught in that primary school, are they?
Is that not what they're being taught?
No, they're just being taught about relationships.
That's why it's come up, because there's new guidelines and they don't want to implement.
But what I'm saying
guidelines.
is that in any case, it's not uniquely British that we are liberal when it comes to different kinds of relationships, because we as a society banned it in the early noughties. And also, as a gay man, I have a lot of gay friends and I have a lot of gay Muslim friends. So I think it's very important that we don't pitch two communities against each other, whilst being absolutely clear that there's no reason why the government should not make sure that all schools teach this with no excuses.
Well, that's where it came from, those guidelines, new guidelines from the government.
Mark Fox.
So I think the more information, the better. I think it should be taught in the context of all the different religious faiths, insight and views on all of this as well. But
Why?
Because I think you want to have as much information as possible.
What's it got to do with religion? This is about relationships.
As much information as possible, because it helps informs people understanding of what's happening and what's going on with themselves and what's going on around them. But
it's religious bigotry that has led us to this situation where 5-year-olds are having to run a gauntlet outside a primary school in Birmingham.
But that, Ian, is a perfectly legitimate view, and that's informed by lifelong learning and experience. And all I'm saying is that the more information, the better. And I would also like us not just to talk about teachers, but parents and families that come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, that have all sorts of people who are members, also helping to shape the environment in which children are learning and understanding and evolving.
Charlie?
I think it raises a very profound question, because the question is a gay relationship bad? And what the people demonstrating outside the primary school were saying, it was bad. Just like Tim Farron was saying it's bad because of Christianity. Just like the Catholic adoption societies said when we introduced provision whereby same-sex couples could adopt. They were saying it's bad. And Michael says don't set the gay community against particular religious groups. Our society has to have a stance on gay relationships, and our stance has got to be they are acceptable, not just acceptable, they are normal, and there's nothing different about them. And that's the society in which we live, and in a sense that's got to be the way that people are taught. We would never tolerate the idea, well, because there are certain sects that regard women as inferior, it's perfectly okay not to teach the equality of the sexes in certain schools. And so both Michael and Mark were slightly flirting with the idea it's okay.
What were you going to say then?
For groups that think basically gay relationships are bad, and they can sort of get passes from that. And that's a very dangerous.
Lord Falconer, of course, is a very skilled advocate. He's smooth.
I hope I misunderstood.
He's a silk that is as smooth as, right? But he's not going to try and trip me, and I suspect Michael, over his smart and smooth.
But why did you say it was a
words.
Legitimate view?
I never, the word legitimate or view never came
misunderstood
out of my
you.
mouth.
I thought you were saying
that was very different from what I was saying. I'm saying it should be universal in all schools, no ifs, no buts.
Okay.
But I think it's risky when callers or people in society talk about this as an issue about one community versus another.
Just to back up the point I was making about religious bigotry, Martin Ross has texted me saying, I'm a Christian, not a Muslim, but I totally support the Muslim parents' stance against young kids being given these books. Too much ground has been conceded to the LGBT zealots. Mark Fox.
So as a Christian, when I
Is that a legitimate view?
Pause. As a Christian, when I came and read at your wedding, I think you speak by action and by example, and you do not take...
I'm not accusing you of being a bigot, but I should make that very clear.
In the same way as we do not suggest that Lord Falconer is anti-Semitic because some of his political colleagues are, we do not tar all Christians, Muslims, Jews and people of religious faith with the views of a few.
But my question is it an illegitimate view? Does it become okay to say gay relationships are bad because you do it on the basis of Christianity?
No, of course it isn't.
So it's just as bad for a Christian, say it?
Of course it isn't.
Okay.
Of course it isn't. But neither, Ian, should you tar all Christians as bigots.
I didn't tar all Christians as bigots. I said that religious bigotry is part of the problem here. That doesn't tar everyone with the same brush.
Some religious bigotry.
I'm just going to move on because we've got about 3.5 minutes left, and I kind of want a yes or no answer to this one. Keith, thank you very much for your call. Nell is in Chippenham. Really interesting question you've got, Nell.
Oh, hi. Good evening to everybody.
Hi.
Yes, I'd just like to ask the question, isn't it time in this volatile social and political climate for voting to be made mandatory both in general elections and electoral referendums in this country as is in, I think, Australia?
Okay, I need literally 20 seconds from each of you. Charlie Falconer.
No, I don't think you should. I mean, if you don't want to go to the ballot box, if you don't want to participate in the electoral process, then you shouldn't.
Mark Fox?
It's a responsibility that you should embrace. It's not something that should be compelled.
Gillian?
I agree, no. And actually what happens in Australia is you get a whole load of sort of monster raven loony sort of parties, and everybody votes for all of those parties, and it doesn't really change much. So but no, it's a responsibility and it's a right. But,
are we going to have a unanimous panel here?
I'm afraid we are. I'm going to say no, but I do think we should be very clear that parties should be trying very actively to try and encourage non-voters to vote.
And Nell, I assume you disagree with the panel?
Yeah, very strong. Well, personally, very strongly. I mean, I particularly talking to people that voted for Brexit. I was a Remainer that then changed my mind. But a lot of people have become so disenfranchised with the whole system and with politicians to the point that they say they don't want to vote anymore. And I think that's extremely dangerous.
OK, Nell, thank you very much. Our final question is a text question from John in Lewisham. What is your favourite hobby? We know that Boris Johnson enjoys making wooden buses. I wonder what he paints on the side of them. Gillian Keegan, what's your favourite hobby?
It's a new hobby. I've just taken it up about a year ago, and it's football. And I've joined the women's parliamentary football team. Yep, and we are
which position?
Well, I wouldn't say we're that sophisticated. We're still kind of testing out the not goal. I'm not very good at goal, but
I can imagine you as a bit of a strong central defender, actually.
Yeah. It depends. It depends what I'm defending. But we're actually all going to Lyon to take part this weekend in the world's longest football match by female players. So it's like this kind of marathon, sort of different teams coming on.
We're getting you back on Monday on the news hour to tell us all about it. Charlie Falconer.
Well, it's so dull, but I love going to the cinema. And I'm quite sure that when people go to the cinema, they see things now which influences politics. My worry is that all Tory MPs went and saw The Darkest Hour, in which, or even as Gillian's saying, Toy Story, but The Darkest Hour, and thought quite legitimately Winston Churchill splendidly stood out against all the advice to try and settle with Mussolini on the basis that things look very, very bad. So they're all thinking, right, we can just leave the European Union now with any plan at all.
Never. Mark?
Swimming in the sea, all year round sea swimming. It's a habit I picked up from you.
What?
Do you remember when you plunged in New Year's Day?
I did. New Year's Day, Cromer, Norfolk coast. And if you're watching this, it was this cold. Michael?
Mine's a somewhat urban version of that. So, I mean, I have a lovely council-run gym with an outside pool, and I love to go swim there to relax. And it also reminds me of how beautiful a social democratic society could be, where the council invests properly in beautiful outside pools for all.
You don't need to be that desperate to get a pool.
I always love these final questions. I think that was the star one so far. Very simple, but very to the point. Gillian Keegan, Michael Walker, Mark Fox and Charlie Falconer, thank you very much for being with us. If you missed any of the programme, you can catch it up on the Cross Question podcast and download previous episodes as well. In a moment, we're going to be asking you about the tweet that has caused Jeremy Hunt a little bit of a problem today when he appeared to call Brexiteers Little Englanders. Not quite that simple, though, but if you are a Brexiteer, do you get fed up with being tagged a Little Englander, even if you live in Wales? It's 9 o'clock.
On your radio, on Global Player.